My name is Tom Place. I am a professional stuntman, and these are my watches.
Hi, everybody. Joined here by Tom. And Tom, you recognize that this is a show about watches, right?
I do. I brought plenty.
You brought some.
Yeah, let's go. Want to get into it? Here we go.
Let's get into it. All right, I think we see what you're all about now. If that's how you reveal watches. So, Tom, before we get into this, and you have some amazing watches. I think they represent who you are, and I'm going to help you out here. I'm a little bit more careful, but hey,
there we go.
You're in the job of being a stuntman, which is something that I think some of us might have an idea of what that's all about. But could you give us a sense of what your career is like, and then also where watches kind of play a role in that and a connection to what you do on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, of course. So,
This is just bothering me as a person. I'm sorry.
Let's organize them. Yeah. So I'm a professional stuntman and stunt coordinator. Mm-hmm. We got an alarm going off.
Yeah, let's just wait for that one to go.
I'm a professional stuntman and stunt coordinator. Mm-hmm. When I'm a stuntman, I'm the guy who is a part of the fight scenes. I'm getting thrown through windows. I'm getting thrown down the stairs. When I'm a stunt coordinator, I'm the guy behind the scenes, heading up the stunt department. I'm breaking down the scripts. I'm figuring out how to bring the stunts that are written to life, safely and realistically.
And you worked with, and I know you're a very humble guy, so you won't probably gloat as much as I'm going to do for you, but Spielberg, Scorsese, like these are names that you've been on sets with, and you worked on countless TV shows, film, so you're on set all the time.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Full-time job.
And then in terms of the watches how you can incorporate them, you probably have to work with like a prop master, but you try to incorporate the watches in some of these scenes, right? Is that part of it, if you can?
Yeah, so it's pretty much, if you try to work with the prop master, they don't really care about the stunt guys. Mm-hmm. You're not going to get a watch from the prop master as a stunt guy. You just wear your own, and they always tell you to take it off, and then you go, no problem, and then you keep it on. And I just love to try to sneak it into the shot when I'm working.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So where do we want to begin? You have a lot of just sentimental value here on the table. Mm-hmm. You have watches that have been seen on the big screen.
Yeah, a couple here have been seen.
And then, so where do we want to begin? Do we want to start with?
I think we can go back to the past, to kind of not quite origin stories. Uh-huh. My first watch was at 4 years old, and I basically never took a watch off after that. Mm-hmm. So this one here is a Seiko World Timer. I was 10 or 11 years old, and I saw that in a magazine. I had always loved the Speedmaster, and that watch kind of reminded me of it with the subdials. Yeah. And it was basically, I begged my parents, the old, I'll pay for half of it. It'll be my birthday present. It'll be my Christmas present combined, but I need this watch. I was in 6th or 7th grade when I got it. And I just remember wearing it to school, for the first time. And not to show anybody. It wasn't for anybody. It was just for me. Like, I had this cool new Seiko on my wrist. And I just loved it. And I still have it. I still wear it. I still change the battery, regularly.
The alarm works. We just heard it just a while ago.
The alarm still works.
So it's definitely still.
And I don't know how to work the alarm anymore, but yeah. So that was, one of the first, nice ones. Yeah. In the collection.
So Seiko was your gateway, like so many others.
Yeah. A different, model Seiko, but yeah, that was my gateway.
Do you have other Seikos on the table too? Some that are a bit more, diver oriented, right? So kind of more the classic form that we think of for Seiko. So you want to move there?
Yeah, sure. The Seiko SKX, which everybody has. I got into the Screen Actors Guild in 2004 on a docudrama about the French and Indian War for PBS. And it was 5 weeks of work, and after I wrapped on that, being a lifelong watch guy, I was like, I need to buy something to commemorate this job, and it was the SKX. And I didn't even know what an SKX was. I didn't even know it was called an SKX until years later, on the forums, and I'm like, oh, this is the watch everybody's got, I chose wisely, and I've modded it a few times over the years, so this is the current iteration of it, but yeah, still works, and gets a couple days of wear every year. Yeah.
It's very cool. Then moving right along to other Seiko dive watches, what else do we have here? We have one other on the table.
So this Seiko dive watch, it's a quartz diver. My uncle, this is like the early to mid 80s, was a New York City fireman. He had that watch, the same model, not that exact one, but whenever we went to their house, I would always ask them, you know, can I wear your watch? I would play with the bezel. I loved like the 4 o'clock crown. I didn't know what a 4 o'clock crown was, but I loved the look of the watch. And then fast forward to college, and I see it in a department store, and it might have been like $350. It was a little rich for me back then. So I went home, and it was actually my first ever eBay purchase. Yeah, it was like half the price. And I was like, all right, let me get it. So that was 97-ish. I mean, all the wear and tear is mine.
Well loved right here.
I still dive with it. I went diving with it 2 weeks ago in Virginia. I just change the battery every couple of years and, you know, keep it going. And yeah, one of my favorites. I mean, it's not something I'd ever get rid of. What am I going to get $100 for it? But it
means more than that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's never going anywhere.
So let's shift into maybe this connection of where watches intersect with film. So is there something on the table here that when you were maybe starting your career, or maybe at some point in your career, you just had a lot of connection to a watch with a specific project you were working on?
Well, so growing up as a movie, you know, fan, loved action movies. Loved when guys had watches on in action movies. You know, the first film I ever worked on was a film called Inside Man, which is directed by Spike Lee, and I wore my Omega Seamaster chronograph on that movie, but more importantly, I wore my Chase Durer, which I don't know what has become of this company. This is a quartz UDT diver. I guess they were kind of happening back in the early 2000s, and I was on set, and I was a SWAT guy. And Spike was like, hey, we need a sniper up in this window up here. So somebody grabs me, you know, hop up in the window. And it was a shot that was over my shoulder as I held, you know, the rifle. And I go, I'm gonna rotate the watch head around. I'm gonna try to get it on camera. And we do the first take, and all of a sudden you hear Spike, like, who used to walk around with a megaphone, and he's like, tell that guy to take his watch off. And I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna get fired for my first ever movie. I didn't take it off, I rotated it back around, but there's a screenshot of the reverse angle, and I'm laying in the window, you know, from the front, and you could see the watch, you could see the red and yellow subdial on there.
That's cool.
And so yeah, you know, it's a robust diver, doesn't really get worn anymore, but I don't know. I don't think I could ever get rid of it, you know, because of it. It kind of sits on a shelf. So
when the watch passion is able to have no fear against Spike Lee and his moment on set.
Right.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, another movie watch. I never got to wear it in a movie, but growing up, I was a huge fan of the Rambo series.
Sure.
And so he had the Chronosport UDT. They have a great screenshot of it in Rambo 3, and that was 1988. So, I mean, there's no Google. I couldn't go, hey, what watch was Rambo wearing? 1995, the year I graduated high school, it's in a catalog. And I go, oh my gosh, that's the Rambo watch I've been trying to find for years. It was $550. I couldn't afford it. And then I graduated high school, had a little cash from, you know, friends and family, and that was my high school graduation present to myself. Lasted a few years until one of the pushers fell off and it flooded. I was swimming in a lake that we've been vacationing at since I was a kid, which we'll have to talk about later because I have a watch that's at the bottom of that lake. So you get into that, you know, a little bit later. But yeah, filled with water, still works. I had the movement all cleaned up, but it's not going to see much action anymore just because of the pushers off of it still.
So I mean, this is for what you growing up. I mean, Stallone and the action stuff. I mean, that's the guy. I mean, that's up there with Schwarzenegger, right? Those are the
they were the two guys. They still are the two guys.
Honestly, you're right. They really are.
Yeah.
Speaking of the Stallone connection, I mean, this is a brand I think about when I associate with, you know, Stallone a little bit too, and I know this is a watch that's pretty special to you as well.
Yeah. So when I watched the movie Daylight in the late '90s, I had no idea what was on his wrist. I was like, what is this watch? I need this watch. And again, I couldn't Google anything. So I used to go to jewelry stores and just, you know, look at watches. And I finally found a guy that was like, oh, he wears a Panerai. I'm like, well, what the heck's a Panerai? So fast forward a few years, 2004, and that was my wedding present. Still had to split it with my wife, but it was like, okay, you got your ring. We're going to find a way to get me my Panerai. And it's the PAM 104, which is a polished steel case. A little too blingy for me. I like a lot of black watches. I don't like a lot of bling. So I sent it away to IWW to have it bead blasted. And then it had like a titanium look, which I kind of liked. And then I was like, I just got to go full, you know, blacked out. like the old Slytech models. And yeah, it's been blacked out for, I don't know, 14, 15 years. It's been bulletproof. So talking about movies, I've had a lot of spring bar failures in my life. I hate spring bars. You have this expensive little hunk of metal on your wrist, and these dinky little spring bars are holding it on. I've had watches fly off my wrist on set, get ripped off in fight scenes, but the Panerai with the screw lugs, and then eventually the FXD, which we'll get into, but the Panerai, if I'm falling downstairs, if I'm doing a fight scene where we're going to be tussling, that usually gets the call. So that's had many, many screen appearances. I tried to get it on Person of Interest. I had to choke Jim Caviezel out in the costumes department. They kept covering it up, and then I would uncover it. They call action, and I would get up right up in camera with the garrote, around his neck. So yeah, and then I worked on the show called The Sinner. I've had a lifelong crush on Jessica Biel, and I got to drag her out of her room, and I was wearing this watch, and at the end of the night, I got a photo with her. The only person I ever asked for a photo with, and it's her and me and my Panerai on my wrist. It doesn't get much better than that.
Yeah, that's it. You made it.
Doesn't get much better than that.
So where do we want to go next? A lot of different routes. I mean, you have a taste clearly, but also it does seem like you dabble quite a bit in a bunch of different things.
I've been collecting for 40 years, so I'm not into hype watches. I mean, watches were a solo journey. I really didn't even know about the watch community that I found these past couple of years. So I didn't even know what a hype watch was. It was just like, oh, I like this watch, I'm gonna try to get this watch. But one of them was the BB GMT.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Got that in 2018. And that one's claim to fame was I was working on the show Billions, and it was me and one other stunt guy, my buddy Luke, and he shows up and he has a 1974 Tudor Submariner on, and I'm wearing my BB GMT. I'm like, man, we have to get our watches on camera today. So the scene was we had to escort an actor out of the office, and I go, Luke, put your watch on your right wrist. I'll keep mine on my left wrist. We'll each grab an arm, and we'll put our hands up on his chest, and we'll escort him out of the office with both of our watches next to each other. And that's how we did it. And I have some great screen grabs of both of our watches up on screen.
It actually made it on?
Actually made it on.
Made it through?
Yeah.
So what is like the process too? Like, I mean, it sounds like sometimes like a director, producer will just be like, oh, let's let that pass. Other times they're very, is it just kind of get lucky?
Like the costumes department, they, unless a watch is specific to your character, which I mean, I don't play real important characters. I play like thug number 2 in an alley that's going to get beat up, or so they never want to give you a watch. And then you try to wear your own, and they're like, oh, that's not period correct, and you're like, no, it's period correct, So they just always tell you to take it off, and then you just.
Sometimes you get lucky.
Sometimes you get lucky, like if it's a period piece, like I worked on a show called City on a Hill, and I had to lift Kevin Bacon up, who was on a gurney. And the show takes place in like 93 or 92. So I was like, I'm going to wear my tag, which is like a 1989 tag. And after the first take, they go, cut. This guy doesn't have a period watch. Get that out of here. Did props give him that watch? And I'm like, no, this is mine. And they were like, okay, you know what? You could wear it if it's period, but you have to set the time to 9:50. So that was cool that they let me,
That's really cool. Yeah.
That they let me get away with it. I never saw the episode. I don't know if it made it in, but they do their best to make sure you're not wearing a watch, in the scene.
There's one watch on the table that, I mean, you were talking about not being hype. I know you're a watch enthusiast first. I just see this crazy Vostok on the table. Can you tell us a little bit more about this?
Sure, yeah. So my cousin back in '92 was a foreign exchange student in Hungary.
Okay.
And he brought this back for me because I was a watch nut, like I said, my whole life. It was like $20 over in Hungary. And so I've had it since '92 or '93. It's never been serviced. I still wear it. I wore it a couple months ago on a show that takes place in the '70s because it's just such a crazy looking watch. I feel like that could get away with,
definitely.
And I've been scuba diving with it. I mean, you can tell how beat up it is. It's been awesome, and it's also been kind of cool to see the resurgence of Vostok over the past couple of years, where I feel like everybody has one in their collection now.
It's a cool favorite.
It's neat, yeah, it's cool.
And the fact you've had this for 30 years now.
Yeah, right, yeah.
It hasn't been serviced. I mean, this is like the Toyota Corolla just running on fumes.
Yeah,
Have you ever seen that?
yeah.
They put the cinder block on there.
Right,
It
right.
just keeps running. So a lot of times people, they get really bothered by all this concept of, hey, what's going to go wrong? My watch can't handle this. Seeing you dump a lot of watches on a table like that, I mean, that's just like, people are, get scared. But like, the reality is these are way more robust than we give them credit for.
They are. I have had watches from a couple brands, malfunction on me. I won't go too far into that stuff, but yeah. But then I just don't buy another one, One watch that kind of has a cool story behind it.
Sure.
It's a Torgoen, this GMT here.
Yeah.
Again, I don't follow Torgoen. I don't, I don't know what they're doing today, but I got this one in 05, 06 for being in a wedding party. And I was working on this show called Jessica Jones. It was a Marvel superhero show.
Yeah.
And I was the stunt double for an actor who had to get thrown through a bus windshield. From the inside of the bus out onto the street. And I had this watch on, and the prop master comes up and he's like, "Oh, Tom, you got to take your watch off." And I go, "I really want to wear my watch for this. Like, this is a big stunt. I really want to wear my watch." And he's like, "But the actor doesn't have a watch on." And I go, "Have we seen the actor on camera yet?" And he goes, "No, like he hasn't been shot yet." And I go, "Then can you give him one of your watches just so I could wear mine?" And surprisingly, he said, "Sure." So I got to wear this watch, and when you get thrown through a bus windshield,
That's a sentence to say out loud.
yeah. So it's a big sheet of candy glass, we call it. It's basically made from sugar. So if you picture one of the lollipops at like a carnival, those huge, like a half-inch thick lollipops, but it's, crystal clear, which if you're going to hit that over your head, it's not going to feel good. But so it's a whole windshield that's made out of this candy glass. And because it was so robust, I basically had to start at the back of the bus. In an action, I had to sprint down the aisle and launch myself through, and down onto the pavement below. And I cut my hand. The watch was kind of soaked with blood. The watch really took a beating on the asphalt.
Yep.
And I don't wear the watch a ton anymore. I mean, it's probably been years since I wore this one, but it's another one
It has that connection.
it's just got that connection. Yeah, like, oh, this is the bus windshield watch. Probably never going to do that again, but I did it. And that, was the watch on my wrist,
Some people have sentimental value. Child gets born. I graduate from school.
Yeah.
You have the bus windshield watch. Let's see. Now, I see an IWC on the table. I want to talk about that. You were actually wearing this to the shoot here today.
Yeah. So, one of my favorite watches, 2002, 2003, whenever it first came out.
Big pile, yep.
I tried it on the first generation with my girlfriend, who's now my wife. And they let me wind it up. They let me set the time, and I was just like, babe, when I'm 40, I'm going to buy this watch. And when I was 40, I bought this watch. I had to sell a couple pieces, to get it. But and then I took a Dremel, and I think they have some photos of it. I scratched on the back 40 and still alive. But yeah, it's huge. Like I said, I'm not into like the bling. Fortunately, most of it's brushed, but wears great. I've gone scuba diving in it. I go snorkeling in it regularly. 60 meters is 60 meters with IWC. I just have a lot of confidence in it and just love it.
Yeah, you talked about you started winding it, and I think that is an immediate reaction whenever you handle this watch for the first time with that crown. It's just, there is a different type of feedback that you get with just how sensitive and exact. You almost feel more connection to the
so
setting
good,
of
yeah.
it. It's great.
Yeah,
and it's timeless. I mean, this design is as iconic as any. It's sure, yes, looks back to a period of time, but at the same tone, you can look at it now and it still looks exactly modern in a way. So it's a beautiful watch. Another, talking about the flight arena, a brand you don't typically see, but whenever I see someone with a watch from this brand, I always get excited. Sinn.
Sinn, yeah. So I have two Zinns now. When I saw Top Gun, I loved the Top Gun watch, but didn't know what it was. Fast forward to 2007, and I'm working on Indiana Jones 4. One of the senior stunt guys has the Porsche design chrono on, and I'm like, what is that? And he goes, oh, this is the Top Gun watch. And I tried it on, and I was in love. And I'm not, as much as I would love the vintage Porsche design, I'm not a big vintage guy. I want all my watches to be able to handle whatever I could throw at them today. I don't want to be like, oh my gosh, it's raining out. Let me let me put this in my pocket. Like that's just not what I'm about. And the Sinn is, you know, similar enough. Like I don't need that Porsche design. I have the Sinn, same model. They've been making this since the 70s, and it's, you know, robust. It's been serviced. It's ready to go. I wore that one recently on Joker 2.
Cool.
I don't know what they're calling it, but yeah, Joker 2, and can't say what I did, but I tried to get it on camera. So there's a camera, you know, right in front of my face, and as I was grabbing something, I tried to get it.
That's very cool.
Right up in there. So we'll see. We'll see what makes it.
It's a badass watch too. I mean, I like the pulsation scale with the tachometer scale too. That's that's an interesting little combination, and it's a brand that, for me, I mean, I think they produce some of the best watches of the type. It's, again, similar theme to what we saw with IWC. Just kind of transcends the concept of like being a period piece. It's just kind of universal.
Yeah.
Utility kind of leads over anything else. You talked about your disdain for spring bars.
Yeah.
Should we jump over to the fixed?
Yeah, let's do it. So as soon as I saw that watch get released, I went, they finally made a watch for me. I'm a big date window guy. Love date windows. So I didn't buy the MN21. I waited. Maybe next year they'll have a date model. Maybe the year after they'll have a date. I saw this one a couple months ago for sale. It had a couple scratches on it. The price was unbeatable, so I jumped at it. And the day that I got it, I drove up to Lake Placid, and I worked on a shoot up there that I can't really say much about, but I got to rock climb. I got to drive some pretty neat vehicles, and the director loved that watch, and he kind of featured it in a couple of shots. So we'll see what comes of that. But yeah, so I mean, it's already been. I've been scuba diving with that a million times already, just this summer alone, and I really, even though it doesn't have a date, like I try to wake up and look at the date on my phone to try to commit to memory for the day, and I just love it.
It's a watch too. I always talk about when I'm looking at like the Pelagos. It represents like that core ethos of like former Tudor, like the Submariner of the 1970s, like in like the Big Crown family of, you know, days prior. Like if those people that were responsible for the design department back then had today's ability to produce a watch, like this represents that concept to me.
Yeah.
Like, this is an absolute winner of a watch. I think it's beautiful.
Yeah, thank you.
So we have a couple more on the table. I see a Weiss, I see a Rolex. I mean, where do you want to go?
I guess we'll do the Weiss, you know, real quick.
Sure.
Then we'll get into Rolex and the Rolex story. But
yeah,
the Weiss, I was reading about Weiss. I mean, I think back in the olden days, like I basically just had Watch Time magazine. Maybe there's a watch blog or two out there that I read, but I knew what Weiss was. And in 2013, I worked in Brooklyn, and I parked outside of a store that had a Weiss in the window. You know, and I was like, oh, let me go in here and check this out. And I ended up walking out with this Weiss, and it's kind of become my, like when I play an FBI guy.
Sure.
I'm in like a lot of gunfights as an FBI guy where I get shot and killed and I fall down. That's the watch I always wear. I've fallen into rivers with that thing. I've fallen on concrete. I've fallen downstairs with it. It's just, it's a watch I feel like I don't have to worry about. The design of that watch is not exactly affixed to a particular era.
Sure.
So when I work on like a period piece from the 60s or 70s, like I'll throw that on too, just because it looks like it can fit into, you know, to any kind of time frame.
Yep, that makes sense.
So it gets a lot of wear, you know.
And it's a cool brand too. I mean, for those that aren't familiar with like Cameron Weiss and his work, I mean, probably one of the few people in the United States, you know, doing a lot of his own assembly and work on his own watches. I mean, he was in Los Angeles. I believe he moved to Tennessee now for his production, but that's their classic field design, and you know, beautiful movement on the flip side there. So very cool.
That's great.
So one final watch, the Rolex. Tell us about this.
So, long story, semi-short. When I was 18 years old and in college, I spend my life savings. I got like car parking attendant. I have, you know, stacks of 5s and 1s in my closet, burning a hole in my pocket, and I buy a Rolex Submariner, brand new, 1996. Later that same summer, we're on my family's boat. We have this little, you know, Boston Whaler style boat, and we're jumping off. We're having fun, and I slip. I catch the clasp on the railing, and as I fall into the water, the watch falls into the water as well. You know, gone to the depths. And I write a letter to Rolex. You know, hey, I'm an 18-year-old kid. I spent my life savings on this watch. I'm swimming in a lake, and it falls off my wrist. you might want to beef up your spring bars, you might want to beef up your clasp. You know, I'm not sure what failed on it. I get a response. We talk on the phone, and while they can't, you know, just give me a free one, we don't have any proof that the watch failed. They give me a very steep discount on brand new watch, any one of my choice. So, you know, beg, borrow, steal. I get the money together. I call them up, and I get a GMT Master 2. So 1996 GMT Master 2, and I had that one for 22 years. Wore that through everything. And in 2018, when, you know, Rolex prices started skyrocketing, I was like, might as well sell it. You know, I had it long enough. You know. So I made a killing on it and just immediately regretted not having that watch anymore. And I replaced it with this one, the 16700. So it was basically a wash. You know, I made all the money and then I spent all the same money to replace it. But yeah, you know, I've been scuba diving in it. I don't take it off for anything. You know, oil changes, work on the car, painting the house. I've taken it down into caves. It's so comfortable and, you know, robust. And while I don't like spring bars, the 5-digit Rolex spring bars I feel like are more secure than a lot of, you know, the current bars out there. So yeah, this is if I had, like, you know, the mythical one watch thing, I think it would be my 16700.
I don't think I've ever seen someone not look cool with a Pepsi GMT on their wrist.
Right,
I mean, it's like it's almost impossible. If somebody wants to show me evidence that it can be done, I'd like to see it. But it's as good as any. And I also, when I look at modern Rolex, not to say that any direction is bad, but there's certainly a lot of change that has happened with their design. This is one of the models that hasn't fallen, you know, victim to like changing its form over the years too. Like it still feels very pure. Like you look at this, something like the Explorer, like you see that pure approach that was still there at the beginning, and it's still there. That's what I think of also, and why I like this design. I think it's one of my favorite contemporary Rolexes.
Oh yeah, same,
beautiful.
Same.
So
agreed. And yeah, so going back to the Rolex that I lost.
Yeah.
If you got a minute, 2020 rolls along, and you know, well, we're all shut down. I was going to say my career shut down. We're all shut down, and I decide I'm going to find this watch. You know, having a scotch with my buddy Greg, and it's like, you know what, we could got to invest in some metal detectors, and we got to go searching for this watch. And I've spent the last 3 summers scuba diving and basically gritting out the bottom of the lake where I remember losing the watch, and you know, just covering ground. I have about 29 hours underwater. You know, searching for it, and you know, hoping one day to pull up the you know, the long lost Rolex from the deep and see what it looks like. You know.
So you have your plans out for this summer already, or you're already heading back out?
Yeah, I'll probably get up to the lake 1 or 2 more times, get a couple more dives in, before the summer's over.
Well, Tom, thank you very much for the sit down.
No, this is great.
This is great. I mean, I really appreciate you just showing this and just seeing kind of a little bit of the back end of how all this, you know, the watches connect to the film, and you know, a very interesting occupation that you have. And now, whenever I have that casting call about the new Mission Impossible movie, when I finally get the call, I know who to call. Help me out, right?
Sounds good. Yeah. Well, just got to wear a cool watch.
Yeah, I know who to call for that too. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, everybody. See ya.